I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and I'm so thrilled today to be joined by the wonderful Anna Kendrick, who is an actor and executive producer on the film Alice, Darling. And in talking a little bit about how you went through the script for this particular role, this is a character that's been so infiltrated by her partner in so many ways that there's moments in the script where it feels like it is her own voice coming through. And then there's moments where it feels like it's her boyfriend, Simon, and things that he's kind of instilled in her. One of the scenes later in the movie where she's talking about, oh, sugar's so terrible for you. It's very clear that that's something that Simon has said to her many times. And there's kind of this parrot effect of it emotionally. And so as you were developing this character and really finding her, I was interested in how you worked with the script to find where you felt like she was able to be her authentic self and where you felt like there was this other version of her coming from him.
Yeah. First of all, that's so funny you bring that up, because I don't know if this is exactly an answer to your question, but the first thing that started coming up for me when you were asking that question was like, I remember early in the process with Mary, the director, and Alana, the screenwriter, and with the wonderful Charlie, who plays Simon, I noticed that even when I was just sort of talking through things with Mary, and we were just supposed to be talking about Alice, I would end up talking about the character of Simon a lot. And I would end up sort of having ideas for Simon's character and being really focused on getting that character right. And it was so much easier for me to focus, like hyper focus on that character rather than my own and my own, like Alice's inner experience, because it's my own inner experience. And it was like safer and faster and easier. And it lived really in my like intellect to just be focusing on like Simon's motivations and the way that Simon might say something and the way that Simon might manipulate, but this is what's under it, but that's coming from a place of fear. And like, it would just be so easy to get wrapped up in that, because that's where I was living for a long time. I wasn't paying attention to my own experience. I was just paying attention to my partner's experience and trying to kind of manage that and predict what he might think or what he might say. And so even starting this process, it was a challenge for me to like relinquish the wanting to micromanage Simon as a character, because I spent so long kind of micromanaging my partner so that I could get safety, if that makes sense. So it was really scary to even go into Alice's experience. And then as you're talking about, try to figure out what was Simon and what was her. And at this point, I think Alice doesn't really know what's her. And but then so finding like who she was like underneath all of that was certainly challenging, but there were also like little things. I remember setting up to do a shot where I was supposed to be in a hammock, just thinking. We were like, anytime that we weren't shooting, if we were waiting on something, Mike, the DP, would just grab the camera and Mary and I would just like run off somewhere, and I would like change my shirt really quickly. And we would steal just like a shot of Alice doing something, because we knew that the audience would need to spend time alone with her to invest in her. And Mary handed me a book. She was like, oh, maybe you're reading in the hammock. And like, without even thinking about it, I was like, oh, I would absolutely have a book, because I would go to the hammock with the intention of reading a book, but I wouldn't be reading the book. I would just be sort of sitting and staring into the middle distance, because you're in such a heightened like limbic state that you can't read, and it was weird to just know those things so instinctually. And it was valuable to the film, but it also really helped me to understand that's not right, to know, to say it when I'm talking about Alice. It was easier to go, oh, that's really messed up for her that she can't read, she can't like take a moment and be alone with her thoughts and have it be about something other than him. And, how to be better for him. And when I talk about me being too, distracted or whatever to read, it's easier to go, well, I was just being lazy, or I was just drifting into space or whatever. And when I'm talking about it happening to Alice, it was easier for me to go like, oh, that's really messed up. So there was like a lot of information that I was getting about my own experience through kind of projecting it onto an imaginary person. And so it was like almost like it helped me unearth some of the stuff that I wasn't looking at.
I mean, I think in all of that, you bring up such an important point, which is, Alice as a character at one point is like, but she says the words, but he doesn't hurt me. And because there's no physical manifestation, it takes her so much longer to see that there's anything wrong there. And yet there still are physical manifestations that she's exhibiting herself. There's a moment where we see kind of like your hands tremoring at the edge of a shot, or, the thing with the hair, where one of the very first scenes of the movie is sitting in the back of a car and just like twirling hair, which at first seems innocuous, but then when we see the later scenes in the bathroom, what that actually is symptomatic of, it's so much more. And so how did you and Mary talk about what you felt were the important physical manifestations, even if they're elements which are coming directly from Alice as a character because of what she's experiencing?
Yeah, the hair stuff was such a beautiful piece of imagery. That was one of the things that I responded to first when I read the script. And Alana the screenwriter is so good at like finding these really evocative images. And, this is I think analogous to an experience that she lived through, but not every detail is the same, obviously. And it almost felt like reading a poem someone wrote about their experience, where it was, the truth of the matter was in there, but the details are all different, and the hair pulling, I don't know if that was something that she had done or a friend had done or something, but I think there's also I feel like women have a really complicated relationship with their hair, because it's this, there's a weird sense of like, if you have beautiful hair, like you are a thriving, like, shining person or something. And to kind of punish your own hair feels really evocative of a wanting to sort of punish the self and prove that you are bad. Like when you have a breakup, the cliche is you cut your hair. And there's something just really beautiful in that imagery. But certainly I think that the physical stuff is real and it does manifest, even if there's not physical abuse in your relationship. Like I found myself getting sick all the time in ways that, I get sick all the time anyway, but in ways that I never had before. And like my skin especially was, I would get like weird rashes and stuff. And because your body just can't heal because you're in such a like fight or flight mode for so long. And I just thought that like the anxiety being in the hands and in the hair was a very, very quiet, but somehow very cinematic thing. So I remember experimenting a lot in the first day of camera testing with like getting that right. And, how close can we get to my hands in my hair and what feels the most like I'm holding the most tension. And I thought that the way that Alana used hair and then later the finding of this lipstick and stuff, these kind of feminine things being dark and anxiety producing, it was just really powerful imagery.
And there's a lot that's expressed in her body language as well, and the way that she kind of folds herself into his space. There's a moment where, it's her and Simon in the bedroom having a conversation, and he's sitting on the bed and she's kneeling on the floor. And so that's obviously a very obvious power dynamic shift between the two of them and how they're placed in that moment. But there's so many moments where it feels like Alice just becomes very inward of herself versus the way that she starts to kind of loosen up and open up a little bit more the longer she's away from him. And so how did you want that also to be a really emblematic system within your performance and expressing her.
Yeah, it's, as you say, it's like there's long stretches where it's like her body is apologizing for existing. And I think that some of the eating stuff is tied up in that as well. The making yourself small. It's not necessarily a literal thing of trying to be sort of thin and beautiful. It's more just about like A, punishing your body, and B, just like making yourself smaller and smaller. And I actually remember when we were shooting feeling like very unsettled, like on unsteady ground, because I really like knowing that everybody at like Video Village feels really good about every scene that we got, every setup, every take, and knowing that like a thing happened, and that means we're good to move on and go to the next scene. And it was very unnerving for me to trust that the right thing to do was to be small and not allow myself to kind of give life to certain scenes in the way that I've worked really hard to be able to do as a performer, and to also to tolerate the fact that on those days, no one at Video Village is going, oh, that was great. I thought that thing you did that with your eyes and whatever, like that was great. Because I know how to do all those things. I've been acting on camera for a long time, so I sort of know what little tricks work and make a scene feel a certain way. And to trust that the performance would be a whole cohesive thing. And that might mean that for the first 15 minutes of the movie, you're kind of going like, this girl might be kind of a wet blanket and I don't know what's going on with her, and trust that the audience would come along and eventually have sympathy for her, even though at first she seems like, I don't know, kind of a bummer and kind of rude to her friends. And just like there's not much going on inside of her, that would be okay in the context of the entire piece. But it was very bizarre to not just do the thing that I do on every movie set and kind of get the gold star from everybody, and be doing something that people don't usually hire me to do, if that makes sense.
No, it does. I mean, that's what I loved about the movie and loved about your performance so much, though, is all those subtleties. And you're bringing up there the conflict with her friends as well that starts to exist, because Simon's been kind of peppering all these little things in her ear for so long that's making her question things in them. And there's this really beautiful scene in the movie where it's between her and Tess, where they've really had a fallout. They've intentionally been left by themselves by their other friend, and you're in the bathtub, and then she comes in with a grilled cheese sandwich, and they're at a space of friction with one another, but there's still such an expression of love, even just, I'm going to let you into the bathroom, I'm going to bring you a grilled cheese sandwich. And so I wanted to ask a little bit about the importance of some of those scenes like that, because there's very little dialogue but so much exchanged in that instance as well.
Yeah, I think that scene, I was supposed to be running the bath, and maybe we both sit on the edge of the bath. But on the day, I was like, I think I need to be in the tub. I'm in such a vulnerable place. Like, I think the like being so broken down that you could not be more vulnerable. You have just completely shed your skin, and like someone could look at you the wrong way and it would just destroy you. And instead, like all she does is very gently come in and like hand me a sandwich, is so powerful. And I was like, and it wasn't a day that we like had an intimacy coordinator there. And so, but I was like, it's okay. I'll just like we can just make the bath water like milky enough, and I'll just stay really low and it'll be fine. And then like, I think I'd curl up in a certain way or whatever, but it was important to me to be in like such a, just the lowest place that Tess has ever seen me in. And for Tess as a character to be such a hard ass, like, I think there was also like a lot more dialogue in that scene at one point. And yeah, it was just sort of about stripping that back and being like, I think she just like asks me if I'm okay. And I think I just like shrug, and it's amazing once you have the person, and Ganya Dio is so talented, and she's also like such a hard ass. She's like my hero. I'm obsessed with her. And so to have just that ounce of vulnerability from her and that care from her, I knew would be so powerful because we'd cast her. So it was amazing to see like, oh, you don't need to say all of this stuff. You can just have these two people in a room together and their energy will kind of work. And that's what I loved about the script in the first place, is so much is not said. And it was really interesting that even once we started filming it, it was like, oh, we can probably strip back even more, which means that there's like, it's hard to find a clip for like talk shows where you're trying to be like, I promise we like talk in the movie and it's about stuff. But it was, it was very, I don't know, scary, but liberating, powerful to be like trusting that just existing in a room with someone or sometimes completely alone and having the camera on you would still tell the story.
There's another moment that's incredibly impactful for her, and especially because it feels like a big turning point in her starting to realize I can't keep trying to exist in this way, which is the moment that they're in the water and she has a piece of jewelry that falls off of her and she's desperately, frantically trying to dive into a muddy lake to see where it is. And then that induces a panic attack once she gets out of the water. And so what was the dynamic of filming a scene where essentially you both have water work and stunt work at play for that, but then also it's one of the most pivotal and emotional moments that's a real tipping point for your character as well.
Yeah. I do always think like that's the job, it's always great in the bathroom mirror at home. And then the job is doing that and making it real in a situation where you're thinking about 10 other things. And yeah, there are like guys in scuba suits, like trying to hold the board steady so that it doesn't drift too far away from the camera. And you're trying to accomplish all those things while giving the performance. But I knew that it was like, if I was going to get one moment right, it was going to be that. Cause when Alice gets out of the water and she starts having that panic attack, what she says is kind of like, you don't understand, I can't do another thing wrong. And that was I already was loving the script, but that was the moment in the screenplay that I was like, oh, I'm absolutely doing this movie, because that was so true to me. And I think so true to so many women, men, gender nonconforming people who've been in this situation. I think that's of the people in my life who have seen the movie, that moment gets called out a lot as like, that's the thought, is like, I have to be perfect because I can't do another thing wrong, which implies like, I've been so bad already. And that makes no sense. And again, like when it's Alice, I can see that. And just like what a powerful piece of dialogue to be like, you just innocently lost an earring. That's all that happened, babe, and but really, really related to that sense that everything would fall apart if I stepped off the tightrope,
Mm-hmm. And with the script as well, there's so many moments where, going back to what you were talking about with it being a very internalized role and having to make a lot of those very subtle choices, we do get those little flickers of, flashback scenes with her and Simon and hearing some of the things that he's been saying, which we get more and more of a window and kind of like the more progressive things, which is also kind of feels very tangential to the relationship, where it starts very gently and then it becomes more and more extreme as time goes on. And so how did having the script and having those moments and really seeing that trajectory of, okay, if she's responding to something emotionally, this is actually what happened between them that is sitting in her head at this moment, as opposed to, just we're going to film this scene and she's kind of thinking about some things that he said, which is a bit more vague.
Well, again, it's really interesting that you like phrase it that way, because it's like, oh, but I know that she's remembering this thing. But when Charlie and I filmed the flashback stuff, or even if there were sort of like lines that might pop into my brain, we always filmed versions that were more kind of obviously harsh from him and submissive from me. And we filmed versions where, kind of using the same dialogue, I was a lot more dismissive and he was trying really hard to frame things in a nice way. And look, I'm just trying to be honest, but, and that meant that the thing I was remembering, I don't know what I'm remembering. And again, I'm not sure what I'm remembering. I'm trying really hard to hold on to what I think happened, but I'm no longer at any point sure about what really did happen. I do not trust myself. I don't even trust myself as it's happening to interpret it correctly. So she's always lost in like, did I misinterpret that even. And it was important to me that the movie end in such a way that if you heard, I don't know if this makes sense, but in such a way that if you were Simon's friend and he told you this story, you would side with Simon, because it was important to me that it wasn't the kind of thing where he finally does slap her or something and we all get to go, okay, so he was abusive. Like, it was abusive before that, and we don't need it to get there for us to call it that. And I also think that, the ending feeling like a springboard toward recovery for Alice was important, but Alice will not be okay for a really long time. All of those things were important to me. So even when I'm, lost and kind of thinking about Simon, and I happen to know, it's probably going to be this piece of dialogue, or this is going to be intercut with this moment. The whole idea is that I don't know what take Mary's going to use. I don't know how I'm going to come across or he's going to come across. And I'm kind of lost in the trying to figure out who was wrong and who was right and how I can be better. And like, love the way that ends up manifesting as like, I'm going to hyper focus on this local girl who's gone missing, because it will be easier for me to hyper focus on that rather than actually try to save myself, because I don't think that I can save myself, but maybe I can save her, and just the way that all of those things were happening. And like, when it becomes too overwhelming for Alice to think about her own stuff, it's like, well, I'm going to focus on this missing girl. And that way I'll feel like a good person while I'm at it,
Yeah. And separately, in terms of a lot of the blocking of the scenes when she's with her friends, it feels like where you are in a scene also communicates so much. When they stop at the gas station for snacks, the fact that she's kind of needing to take her own time, because even just for her to buy snacks at the gas station is a whole emotional hurdle for her to overcome. Whereas for them, it's like, oh, what should we have? Maybe we'll grab this. This sounds fun. And so you're standing very separate to the two of them. And then even when you're in the house, there's very specific intention. It feels like, from a narrative standpoint, of where you how close you are you in the middle of them? And so how did Mary set about figuring out how she could use that within scenes and work with you on, okay, where are you actually going to be within the scene?
Yeah, well, I mean, to your point, like, there are a couple of things at play that, yes, just like picking out a snack. And I think in that moment, it does sort of manifest as some body stuff. But I think even if it was like picking out which hair tie to use, it's like everything becomes like second guessing yourself. And like, you need your own time and your own space to make this decision that seems like life and death, because like, you're just trying so hard to get it right and do the right thing. And that's how you are going to stay safe. And also, being away from your friends means that I get to hide more, because you can't tolerate, being before people who can really see you, because it's like, I just will build more walls and put on more masks. And these people really know me and really see me. And so I have to kind of avoid them. Even on this girls' trip, I have to like be busy going on runs and like investigating this thing with the community, and, just any excuse to sort of stay away from the people who might actually notice what's going on inside of me, because then I would have to look at it myself. So yeah, that kind of separation was important for all of us. And, being worried about, but also enjoying the fact that it comes across as coldness and rudeness, because it's, being worried about it in the sense that it's like, oh, are people going to invest in Alice and come along with her? But also enjoying it because it's complicated. And I wanted her to feel complicated, because even people who are in horrible situations, they might not act like saints at any given moment. And that doesn't mean that they're not a victim,
And also in talking a little bit towards spoiler territory about the end of the film, I wanted to talk about that scene where one of her friends has smashed in the back of his car as she's about to leave. And that becomes this real jolt for her. She gets out the car, and that's the moment where she's refusing to leave. And it's so beautiful to watch the way that it plays out, because her friends are literally standing in this triangulation around her as this literal wall. And it feels like there was a moment where it was like she needs to just make eye contact with her friend, but it also felt important that she did look at Simon at a certain point. So it wasn't just her friend saying she's staying, she's not going with you, that it was also her communicating that as well, but allowing for that space to build up to that moment. And so I wanted to ask you about building a lot of the delicacy and finding that time, and, how soon feels too soon for her to look at him, making sure we don't hold it too long. And then also just figuring out that formation, because I thought that was such an amazing detail in the film.
That's really funny. Because there were so many moments in filming where, Mary had one thought, I had another. And of course, like so many films, I'll do one for you, one for me. And you decide in the edit what works better. And that nobody could, I get why on the day, everyone was like, why are you staring at Sophie? What is going on? Like, this is such a weird choice. And I was so certain. It was like the only thing that I was like, if I'm certain about one thing, it's this, that like, in this moment, she has found herself on a tightrope of willingness to leave. And if she falls, that will be it. And the only way to stay on that tightrope is to just maintain that connection with Sophie, because like Sophie has done something so brave and so crazy. And it's like, okay, I'm just going to follow you, and we're going to get on this tightrope together, and we're going to hang on together. And it was one of those funny things where, like, I think throughout the day, every producer or whatever sort of like casually was like, so what's happening here within this scene? Like, and I was like, I know it's weird, you guys, but it's really important. It's going to work. Please trust me. And it was the only thing that I was like, this is the only version that I want to do. And it was, I think I also felt like such a terrible scene partner to Charlie, because Charlie is giving this incredible performance. And it's like, he's the sweetest guy in the world in real life, obviously. And I was like, normally you would have a real scene partner. And instead he's like acting to the side of my head. So it was like almost energetically like sucking all the courage out of my friend, and like being able to sort of like laser focus that on Simon for like a second that I can tolerate it, and then just go like, and I'm back, and that was a really fun scene for me. And I will say that Wumi totally got it. So thank God she wasn't like, why are you staring at me in this scene? But that was a really fun day. Do I want to call it a fun day? I'm always with movies like this. You're like, can I say fun? I love my job. Like it's complicated, because it's some of the like most harrowing stuff ends up being really fun because it's so cathartic. And I think it helped also that Wumi, Ganyadeo, and Charlie were just like acting their asses off that day. So everybody was just so honed in, and I was so excited about the performances that they were giving. And so it was a really hard day, but like also I had a lot of fun. It's weird to say that, like to be like, you can do both things at the same time, I guess. You can like
both are allowed to be true.
Yeah, like reenact like a really traumatic thing, and like be bringing up all kinds of really complicated feelings, and also be having a lot of fun.
I think, like you said, it's also the catharsis of doing something like that as well.
Totally.
And, you were saying earlier how obviously it was important to build her into a place of more hopefulness, but it's not something where just because she leaves him that everything is okay tomorrow, and she's not going to be okay for a while. It's going to be a work in progress. And so did you always have a sense of where you wanted to carry her journey to in the film, and where you wanted to leave her narratively for the audience?
Yeah. I think the scene, when we're sort of doing with the three of us, are the three friends, they're sort of doing this like hands on heart thing. And they asked me like, did it work, in the way that implies like, are you going to be okay? And that there isn't an answer, and how could we know? And, I think that there's, there's a feeling in real life when a friend is going through something hard that you just want them to be okay so desperately that sometimes you'll pretend it is okay before it is, and that they're okay before they are because of your own anxiety. And again, like being willing to hold space for somebody and tolerate when like they're really in a precarious, horrible place. And that's okay. And not be like, but you're going to be fine, is one of the hardest things to do. Like, how crazy is that? That like one of the hardest things to do as a friend is to stay with someone in a space where they do not yet know if they're going to be fine. And I think that scene is really powerful because we get to leave on a little bit of a note of, we don't know if she'll be fine. And her friends just live with that, and they don't try to like fix it and, tell her that like time will heal all or something like that. And that scene, I think is really beautiful and helpful. And then also, of course, you do want to have a moment where Alice is like in her body and, alone, sort of alone with her thoughts, the way that she's been alone with her thoughts throughout the whole movie, but actually focusing on herself and her experience. And I think originally we were trying to figure out something with like a water snake or something. I never know if you should talk about like versions of the movie that existed before the final thing, because you want to be like, oh, it was all the master plan and it was always this, because like, but the things change and you find things that are totally fascinating and beautiful in a different way. But originally there was something with like a water snake, but then you realize like controlling and training a water snake doesn't happen. So, we just made it sort of about the water. And I think that's another reason why I was like, oh, when Ganadio brings me the sandwich, I have to be in the bathtub. I have to like be sort of willing to get into this more vulnerable state and unwilling in so many other places in the movie. So that just kind of risk of like dropping into the amount of grief and pain. I think, jumping into a very cold lake is a really beautiful piece of imagery. And, I'm glad that it didn't end on like a kind of serene smile or something like that. It's, just the discomfort of being underwater and then coming up for air. But also, I'm pretty sure, I don't know if it's the final shot or the penultimate shot, but we did do some like real water work where we had two guys in, scuba suits for safety and stuff. But I think at least the second to last shot, we stole, because the place I happened to be staying was by the lake. And so the cinematographer came over with a camera and he bought a fish tank at Walmart. And this is the high-tech secret of that underwater shot that is like the final frame of the movie. He bought a fish tank at Walmart and put the camera in the fish tank. And I just went in the lake in like my bra, and we like did 3 takes of that shot. And that's what's in the movie, which I actually love that kind of thing, but it like wasn't exactly what we all pictured it to be when we were shooting it the right way, on the one day that we had allotted to shoot the water stuff. And so it was like, well, I guess after work, there's, I think Mary and Mike, the cinematographer, and I were kind of like wink, wink, like for this short film that we're also shooting on the side, because it was obviously like very much after hours and on the DL. And like, that's sometimes how you have to tell a story when you don't have the resources to just like get the whole water team back, No,
I love details like that in how films end up coming together. And I think it's so beautiful what this film has been able to accomplish in terms of the way this story's been told. And I love everything that you've been able to bring to this role and this character. So thank you so much for such a great film. And thank you so much for talking about it. Really appreciate it, Anna.
Thank you so much.